Neil, welcome back to another fans Q&A for September 2024. Just to start with, before we get into the fans' questions, obviously this time you've opted to publish the questions ahead of this video being published. Just talk me through the process behind that.
Yeah, I think it's always great to get a number of questions coming in from the fans. I understand that a lot of fans want a lot more information coming from the club, so I think it's an opportunity to obviously speak to them on camera and give them some more answers. But also I think it's really important, as we're a fan-owned club, to be transparent. So I want everyone to know that we don't filter any questions. They'll all come into a central box and then they're sent on to me. And every single question that has come in will be answered on camera. So in terms of transparency, it's being as open and honest as we can as a club.
And in terms of the questions that we've received this time, sort of, as you say there, they've come in and then they've been sent over to you. You've put them into different categories, which we'll look at over the course of this Q&A. The first category that we're going to start with today is commercial and ticketing, which is obviously a massive part of this football club. The first question being is it anticipated that some of the stands will be renamed in due course? Would that purely be a commercial decision taken by the board through sponsorship?
I mean, I don't think anything's just as simple as saying it's a commercial decision. You know, there's a lot of talk about making sure that we maximise our revenue in terms of the commercial operation. Some of that in terms of stand naming. We obviously have most of our stands are named, whether it's Lenny John Rose stand, whether it's Neville, etc. And some of those will be emotive decisions that will need greater input than maybe in some cases rather than me or the board. Those decisions are made as and when those conversations happen. So if a main sponsor was interested in joining the football club as a partner and they said, you know, for example, we like this stand, my preference at first would be to partner that name. So if it was, you know, for example, the Lenny John Rose stand, then it might be the Lenny John Rose stand sponsored by Bob's Builders, for example, rather than losing the name completely. Now that would be my choice. But however, if there was a set of money on the table that was prepared to change that, then obviously being that an emotive decision, then at times we would need to discuss it with the wider fan base before we make those decisions.
Two questions that sort of follow on from as you've sort of just mentioned there. One says, would the Lenny John Rose stand be exempt from the process in difference to wishes of the fans? And also secondly, is there any reason why the cemetery end stand could not be renamed due to its connection with the main ground benefactor?
Okay, so the cemetery end stand that you've just talked about, there was, my understanding was there's a significant amount of money put in to put that name on the stand. However, that was for the first season back, and now we're outside of that first season back. Some of the other stands obviously have a closer connection in terms of, you know, former Bury legends, etc. So that's another separate conversation. So what I'd say is, referring back to the first answer I gave, which is, I don't think anything's ever off the table, but ultimately, why do you want to go and potentially have a conversation where you're upsetting someone if the conversation's not to be had yet? So at the end of the day, if and when that comes to fruition, then we're quite happy to look at that. But at the moment, it's not at that stage where I've got someone knocking on my door from a commercial entity point of view saying, we want the name off that stand and how much is it?
The next question, how much sponsorship has been generated so far for the 24-25 season?
Okay, so the positive point in this place is that I've seen some bit of chatter out there, and we have actually exceeded last year's sponsorship numbers that came in from the football club. Now all that will be reflected in the accounts which we publish on the FSSB website, and members will have access to that, so it's completely, again, transparency. You might have seen we've launched a new partner programme that was launched in the last couple of weeks, and that is trying to drive the club forward to the next step. So I'd encourage all fans to have a look at that partner programme. I know some boards, etc., might look free at the moment outside. However, you know, what I just would like to get across is, if you're selling a board to a traditional just as a sponsor, that can be quite a quick conversation. If you're doing a partnership deal which is running into thousands of pounds, they take a bit longer to get over the line and a bit more to manufacture. So what I will say is that the cemetery end, which is currently from the eyeball looking empty, the semi end is completely sold. So it's currently just in manufacturing, and we're hoping to get that up as soon as possible, but obviously we're on timelines with manufacturers, etc.
And sort of following on from that, what are the club doing to market and advertise the club to the people of Bury, could we see advertising in the town in order to attract higher attendances?
Yeah, so there's a couple of points on this. So obviously we do the Manchester Road sign and in making sure that's up in every game to let people who drive past know that we've got a game coming on. We do have a partnership with a firm in Bury, and we have a digital screen in Bury Town Centre where we advertise games and other key things going on in the club. There's some early communication going on about putting a big TV in the actual ground itself, potentially between the South Stand and the Manchester Road end. So that's at early stage discussions. And then also, it's just a case of the more we work with our community and have more eyes on the pitch, that should in fact drive more commercial revenue in as well.
Sort of following on from that, in terms of commercial revenue, why has the club failed to attract a single match sponsor so far this season?
So you'll know yourself, Adam, that is obviously not true. We've obviously announced a number of sponsors already across games. I touched on this. I think I answered a fan who sent me this question, but last season, off memory, we had 9 match sponsors out of all the home games, 23 home games, whereas we've already got, pretty much that number already booked in. So we haven't had none. We haven't had as many as we would have liked. We would have liked every game booked up, but as long as we're heading in the right direction from last season, then we're happy in that moving forward.
Moving sort of sidestepping into catering, obviously the club have announced over the summer a several-year deal with the Difference Group, who obviously have come in to provide the club's catering. One fan asks, how did the caterers get the contract? What stood out about them?
So when you go in to look at a new caterer, you're basically looking at a complete tender process. Now, what we did is in the last 10 weeks of last season, I and some of my colleagues went out to other football clubs, from clubs in the league to clubs in non-league, and looked across what the offering was. So first of all, can they deliver on potentially what they're going to say when they're pitching you the business? Secondly is, can they actually come in and deal with a crowd of the size you've got? So there was some people we spoke to, for example, that grounds I went to that I really liked the catering. However, when we then had conversations with those caterers, they couldn't deliver to the crowd size that we had. So if you went to, for example, some League One, League Two, and even Championship grounds that had crowds of 15,000, for example, when we got into conversations with those partners, they said, we can't deliver on a 3,000 crowd. We're just not willing to take the contract on. So straight away, that eliminated some people from that conversation. When you then went on some non-league grounds, you'll know the average attendance in this league is about 300, and we have one of the obviously higher attendances in non-league. But what then happened is, if you go to a non-league ground where you get lovely, homemade bacon and you get a nice old lady behind the counter, she can't scale that up. So that's then also a consideration as well. And then in terms of local businesses, we had lots of local businesses who said to us, well, we can do your match catering, but we can't give you any staff to effectively execute it. So when we're going out to tender, it needed to be someone who could deal with the crowd size that we've got and staff it for us and give us an appropriate amount of money worth doing it on the table. And that came down then to, we limited that down to 3 people. And what stood out about the Difference Group, so Difference, we went to sample at Salford, and we went to sample at Halifax. They were really professional in their approach. They delivered on what they said they could deliver on a match day and to the fans. The food was of good quality, whether that be in the kiosk or the hospitality. And then ultimately, when they came to discussion with us at the table, the deal was an attractive deal for us to look at. Now, ultimately, what we won't be able to all tell fans is, we could talk about a catering deal for a long time on camera now, but ultimately we gave a top line headline deal. Now that top line headline deal was we'd signed a 6-year contract with the Difference. Now ultimately there will be a lot of within that service deliverables. There will be things such as break clauses. There will be KPIs within that to make sure they deliver on that and we deliver on our side of it. But clearly I haven't gone on camera before and given the 6 or 7 pages of the contract that's out there. But ultimately, I'm not just going to sign a 6-year contract and lump us up to 6 years, and if it doesn't work, we're stuck in a contract, and what we're going to do. So, but I can't always come out and tell the fans as much information as they'd all like. So what I'd say is early doors in terms of feedback with the Difference. The chip van is going really well in the corner by the south stand. The blue trailer is going really well as well in terms of the offerings that we've got there. The kiosks, there's still some work to do. So work to do around branding and making sure we're maximising the offerings we've got there. and maybe adding some more variety to the menus. Some fan gave me some feedback last week about vegetarian options, which we fed straight back. Any feedback we get regarding catering, whether that be positive or negative, we keep on a master tracker and we make sure we have those conversations. I have a weekly call with the caterer every single week to talk about the following week, what the challenges are, what we can change, and feedback to them. And so early doors, it's really positive. However, ultimately, there's still work to do. We're not where we want to be.
You've covered most of the points there that sort of fans have asked around catering, sort of in terms of the 6-year contract clauses and the feedback. Just one point that I don't think you covered was this fan asks about sort of price comparison, and they say, do you have any price comparison as they see them expense, obviously referring to the kiosk over this year?
Yeah, so, and forgive me for this because I'm obviously going to go back to a sheet because I can't remember all these prices in my mind. So I know that when we first announced we've got a new caterer and the menus appeared online, and there was a bit of a shock almost. People thought that we'd doubled our prices, and it, straight away I was thinking to myself, well, have I missed something? So I didn't think I had, and I hadn't. So I've got some prices in front of me. I'm just going to run through a few of them. So in terms of, now what I'm comparing us to here is last season, because that's, I think, the most important thing the fans were looking at. So if you look at last season, hot foods, you had most of our pies were at £4 or £4.50. Hot dog was £4.50. Drinks were between £2 and £2.50. Snacks, crisps £1.50. Chocolate £2. In terms of this season's prices, with the difference, pies are generally £4.30. One's £3.90. So 20 or 30p either way. Hot dogs £4.70, which is 20p more. Drinks, some are 50p cheaper, some are 50p more. But then the main thing is when you're doing an analysis of what fans buy on a day, so we get every single bit of data from the difference. So we get what's your average transaction value, we get how many transactions are made on the day, we get who buys 2 items, who buys 1 item, every single bit of data. And that is another reason for going with this catering firm, is we get data. And when you get data, you can make informed decisions. When you haven't got the data, you can't make those decisions. And what the data was telling is that most fans who come to a match and use a kiosk, they buy generally at least 2 items. So what was important to us is that we put an offer on to reflect that. So for an example, we now do a combo deal. So a hot drink and snack combo deal is £3.80. Now, if you buy those items separately, you'd save 70p. We do an alcohol combo deal. So if you bought a burger and some alcohol, it should be £9.40, but actually you save £1.40. So we've put combo deals in place. Now, if you, again, compared to last season, we didn't have all these combo deals in place. So hopefully, we can probably get this comparison sheet out, which I'm happy to distribute. But basically, the narrative around, a certain section of the fan base thought it was more expensive, that's just not true. The facts are, and all the figures I've got here is, the catering in comparison, some things are 20p more, some things are 20p less. But ultimately, if you buy a combo deal, which most fans buy 2 items, then ultimately it's cheaper than last season.
You've sort of answered this question in part in other answers, but just to sort of clarify the position for the fan that's asked this specific question, which reads, where are we up to with sponsors / board sponsors in the stadium?
Yeah, okay. So most important thing to get across here is there's 3 sources of revenue that a club can get in, okay? That is commercial and sponsorship, match day, i.e. bums on seats, and broadcast, okay? We at this level don't get broadcast money. A League 2 club would get £800,000 broadcast money. That straight away is off the table because we obviously aren't on TV. We've now got 2 ways of getting revenue, okay? And it's important that we maximise both of them. We have the commercial revenue, which is whether you call that boards, whether you call that front of the shirt, whether you call it naming rights. There's lots of different aspects to that. The traditional way of sponsorship, if you went back 20 or so years, was you sell a board space, you sell a front of the shirt. Now, as sponsorship has evolved over the last 20 years, that's moved into what we call a partnership. And that's what I distributed the last couple of weeks with our partnership programme. The idea of that partnership programme is, along with the sponsorship built in, it comes with a set of commercial rights. That allows the commercial partner and the football club moving forward to build a meaningful relationship. And then that allows you then to bring in more sponsorship. So at the moment, whereas fans may see a board empty and it's, well, this board's empty and what are we doing about it? We are involved currently in negotiation with more deals than just a board. A board may bring in, for example, anything between £600 and £1,000, depending on where it is in the space. Okay, we're involved in much more bigger deals in negotiation at the moment, and those deals take a period of time to get over the line. That's not to say that we don't want someone to ring up and just say, okay, have you got any more board space? So where we are currently is there is no single boards left in the ground for sale. They've all been taken. Okay. However, that's not to say that if someone doesn't sign up to that be a local partner at £2,000, which we've distributed, in that, if you look at that package closely, you get a board included. So you might say, well, Neil, how are you going to give them a board? Well, what we'd do is we'd find them some other space. It might be front of building space. It might be other space in the stand for us able to deliver on what we've committed to. But in terms of just visual, what you see around the stadium, there's a lot more than just the 35, 40 boards that you sell that we can make an asset. But it's important that whatever partners we go with, that we build a relationship with them so they feel ingrained in the fabric of the club, and then we can move that partnership forward.
Final question in the commercial and ticketing section reads, would the club ever be interested in operating a concession or 19 to 21 rate?
Okay, so at the moment we have obviously 3 ticketing categories. We have obviously our adult or 16 to 18 and on our under 16. And at the moment, we need to understand our data of our fan segments before we can make ticketing decisions moving forward. We're not lucky enough to have a ticket department. We don't have a ticket department. We have a ticket system, which effectively we pay a commission on. It's not our own ticketing system, there's probably some ticketing questions coming down the line further, especially with Radcliffe and how we've ticketed that I expect to come up. But ultimately, in order to make sure you've got your ticketing right and having the pricing, it takes a lot of manpower. And people will know that I talk about, capability and manpower a lot, because ultimately that's a whole different conversation. So nothing is off the table. There's also been questions before around, do we have an OAP category, etc. But ultimately, we have to remember that we're a fan-owned club. So everything that we might want to do, it may be that we want to have an OAP category. It may even be that we want to have an 18 to 21 category. But ultimately, if you did the number crunching and you can't afford it, we don't have someone who's ploughing money into the football club, and we have to deliver at least a break-even line. So some of the initiatives that we want to do, the fact is we just sometimes will not be able to do.
As we said at the top, Neil, there's a lot of categories to cover today. The next one being costs, and the first question in this category reads as follows. It is quite a long one, so you'll have to bear with me here, but it reads, my question is, why do you think it was acceptable to use our money to take 3 security guards with you to an away day to police other grounds? If you try and say the home team paid for it, why have you bullied them into thinking this was required? If the police and courts don't see fit for this, then why do you believe you can make them decisions? I've also seen the videos from this encounter, and you appear to be trying to antagonise the fans and appear to be laughing at them.
Okay. So I'm assuming this is, although it doesn't say, I'm assuming this is in reference to probably Abbey Hay. So I think it's important to say that, first of all, as stakeholders, which our other clubs are within this league, we work with all clubs before we go to every game. So we would send a pre-match email, making them aware of any issues we may have, how we can work together, how we can improve things. We do that with every match we go away. We also do it with everyone who comes here for a home game. So my matchday secretary will deal with any games that we have here. Part of that is to assist teams with stewarding. So most grounds we go to have an average crowd of 200 or 300, and generally they'll have volunteers. General reason being for that is because, first of all, they can't afford stewards, and secondly is when you go under 250 fans, you don't actually, according to a green guide, need stewards in there. We're obviously a different case, as I won't need to explain to fans because of our large following. So it's important that we assist all these clubs when we go to them with the stewarding. We have that dialogue them with the head of the game. We alert them to any potential issues which we foresee, and we work together. So when we did go to Abbey Hay, they did provide the stewarding. We, as any football ground would do in any league where you go to, is generally, if Man United play away, for example, they will take some of their own stewarding with them because they know their fans, they know their faces, etc. And because of the profit that these clubs make when we go to them, because effectively we're taking a large amount of support with us, a lot of those clubs that we go to are happy to pay for our stewarding. So to talk about Abbey Hay in particular, so Abbey Hay paid for 2 or 3 of our stewards that went there. So it didn't cost our members anything, it didn't cost our club anything. But what it ensured that we did is that we had no trouble there on the night. Now, ultimately, yes, I was at Abbey Hay, and yes, I was on the gate, and ensuring that some of our more troublesome supporters, let's call them, didn't get into attendance, because ultimately I do have a duty of care also to our supporters to attend football matches safely. And considering the backdrop of some of the supporter issues we had right at the start of the season, which I'm glad to say has obviously got a lot better, and you'll have seen a note from Manchester FA, it's important that we work together with the other football clubs. So there's no bullying, we can't tell other clubs what to do, but what we do is we work together with all clubs. So if it's a football team coming here, they would ask us our advice on making sure that their supporters are looked after, and that's just the same with any football club. So that decision for me was the right decision. If it becomes a case of then we need to pay for that stewarding ourselves, well, clearly that's another dynamic which we'd need to look at. But so far, anywhere we've took our stewards to another ground hasn't cost this club any more money, and ultimately it's kept the fans safe and enjoying the football, which is the better priority.
Just sort of secondary to that, just picking up on the last bit, obviously, from your perspective, giving you a right of reply on the sort of second half to that question, which says you, quote, antagonise said fans and appear to be laughing at them. What's your response to that?
So there's no need for me to antagonise, our fan base. I want to work with the fan base. I want people to enjoy and come and watch the football. But, ultimately, I guess if I'm telling a supporter on the gate of Abbey they can't come in, clearly they're probably going to be upset, which you'd understand. There was no laughing from me. There was no, antagonising anyone. But ultimately, if you're telling a fan they can't come into a game that they've travelled to, they're probably going to be upset, and probably quite rightly so. But what I'd say with any fan in that situation is then, they need to look at their own behaviour within that situation. But ultimately, we're a fan-owned club. We want to be a community and a family club. And, ultimately as well, the club have a responsibility to me and a duty of care to me to ensure my safety, because I'm an employee of the football club. So I should be able to go to away games and support Dave and his team. Bear in mind, I do support Dave and his team throughout the week in a secretarial capacity. And ultimately, I should feel safe and sound to go to games, and I shouldn't be, potentially put at risk by the fan-owned club. So ultimately, we need to make sure the fans are protected, but we also need to make sure that me and members of the board are protected as well.
So you mentioned home games, Neil, in the answer to your previous question, and the sort of the work you do with clubs that visit us here at Gig Lane, and obviously a recent game in the FA Vars has sparked this next question from the fan, which reads: the decision to close the main stand the Burscough FA Vars game has created some discussion. Can you offer any insight into the cost savings made through this, i.e. stewarding, catering?
Yeah, no problem. So when we steward a game, obviously it's a significant cost. Most clubs in this league, if you have under 250 fans, generally only have volunteer stewards on, so no cost to them. Because we're classed as a full stadia, then we will need to align to the Green Guide. The Green Guide says that we have to have one steward to every 250 fans. Okay. It also then says within the main stand, you have to man every entrance and every exit. So if I give you an example, the main stand holds over 2,000 people. If you only have 300 people in the main stand, you'd have to man still every entrance and every exit. So if you walk past the back of the stadium, you start counting how many of those are, okay, you're talking at least 8 stewards, okay, all on a 5-hour shift, all at a significant cost, okay. So when we had the first round of the Vars, the Magul game, we got a crowd of 1,500 people. They went across the main stand and the south stand, and those two stands together hold, around 5,000 people, but we only had 1,500 people in them. Now, the advantage the south stand gives you is, because effectively you haven't got all the entrance and exit points, you can steward it according to the Green Guide, so 1 in every 250 stewards. Whereas, obviously, the main stand, as I said before, that you can't. So in terms of why we did it ultimately because we knew the crowd was going to be similar to what it was before, which I think it was 100, there was 100 different, so we weren't far off. And we did it ultimately for cost savings. Now, in terms of what that cost saving is, you're talking about £2,500 in steward costs. So I think off the top of my head, we've gone from something like 31 stewards on that day to around 13 or 14. So you're talking about a significant cost saving with no lower crowd. And in terms of making my job, as people remind me often, is to make sure the club's run correctly and that we look after members' money. It would be irresponsible of me from a members' money point of view to spend more than I needed to on stewards. So I know it wasn't to everyone's taste. I know some people love sitting in the main stand, but it's purely when we're trying to, we get lots of questions, and you've asked me before about, are we filling advertising boards? Are we bringing in commercial income? Two most important things for a football club is to raise revenue and to drive down costs. That is the only way you make profit. So ultimately, as much responsibility as I have to make sure I bring in new commercial partners and sponsors, I also have an obligation to make sure we manage our cost base. And that's what we did.
You've covered this next question pretty much in that last answer, but we'll just sort of read it out for the fan that's submitted it, and if there's any additional information that you haven't touched on in the last answer, then you can do so. The question reads, is there any work going on to try and relax ground regulations and reduce the stewarding requirements in future?
So in terms of relaxing ground regulations, ultimately we have to engage our stakeholders from the safety advisory group. So we are governed by those meetings that will have them and what they suggest. And ultimately, some things will be you have to do it, you don't have a choice. Some things will be, we advise you to do this. So if I give you the best example I can think of is, we don't serve beer, after half time. Now that's an advisory point, but ultimately, if we then said, well, okay, we're going to do it and we're going to choose to serve alcohol, if there was a problem and we got a charge, it would come out that, well, you were advised not to do it and you went across that advice. So it's really important, and because of the good work that we've done over the last few months and been congratulated on by the Manchester FA, it's really important that we listen to this advice, because it just makes it that if anything happens detrimental to the club, that we can stand there and say, well, we took all the advice, we went and gained all the advice and we put it into practice. So in terms of ground measures, there's only so much we can do. We have just undertook a review of total stewarding costs and looked at where we can save money with that, and that will be under review as always, as everything is.